Hello. Thanks for tuning in again. This is, I believe, video number 4 of Chris and I and our series, Enacting the Platonic Dialogues. So before I give some context to this video, some housekeeping. So given the quarantine and the coronavirus and everything that's happening, my company, the Circling Institute, has brought is doing all of its trainings and its drop-in events and training events all online, which has really been quite successful so far. I've been quite impressed with how deep and meaningful circling can be online. So all the information, if you're interested in the events, that you can find out through the Facebook link below or from the website link below. Also, if you're interested in doing one-on-one coaching with me, email me and I'll email you back and talk about what that entails. And I believe that that's it. So I hope everyone's doing well. So this was my first venture into reading with any seriousness the Platonic Dialogues. And I have to say, I was sufficiently profoundly perplexed in the way I'm getting, if this is just the beginning, the profundity and the fun of what comes through reading these dialogues is quite amazing. And what I'm left with now, and ask me next week, but like right now what I'm left with is thinking a lot about this figure ground shift where suddenly you're looking at the foreground and then all of a sudden the background becomes the foreground. And something in that shift that reveals being in this way that's very, very difficult to describe or to put into words, that Socrates seems to be brilliant in inducing. And I'm also thinking about the relationship to that in wisdom, and about wisdom being something that is something that one cannot possess, but it has something to do with that background and foreground shift, and an awareness of that, and in a way one participates in reality in such a way that wisdom may show itself in the non-possession of no one in particular. So I had a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we're doing this. So also, I will put in Scribe, which is a website that hosts a lot of PDFs for free. I put a link to the translation of this dialogue that we're reading down in the notes. And so you can just click that, and then I recommend you read along with us. All right, enjoy. Sometimes it's hard. It's like kind of hard to tell what mood I am until I start talking to somebody. You ever notice
Yes.
that? Like,
Oh, yeah. I had the same experience.
like that sense of just like, you don't quite know where you're at until you like start talking to somebody or some kind of thing comes out of it. So I'm just aware of being, where am I?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you have to wait to encounter yourself with the first, with contact with the first person you meet.
Totally. So one of the things that you proposed today was you had the urge to, or the instinct to just start jumping into the first dialogue of Plato. Mm-hmm. What we were doing was we were starting off reading your paper with John and yourself to set context. But there's so what we're talking about now is just jumping into the first the first dialogue, and then maybe after this one, we go back to the paper and disperse it back and forth. I would imagine that has something to do with just that it's clear that it was just taking a while.
Yeah, I mean, it was taking a while, and also I think, I mean, the paper's divided up into a few sections, and we did get through the first section, and I think that there was a pretty, I mean, both in the paper itself, but also our conversations around it, we talked a fair bit about just the dialectic and the dialogic process. I think we foregrounded the process about as much as we needed to, or maybe even more than we needed to. So,
Sweet.
I feel I'm starting to feel the burn. I want to dive into Plato directly,
Right
and bring him properly into the conversation, because we've just been talking around him. So that's just my feeling about it. But I've also lived with that paper, so I don't have as much personal need to sit with it. So that's why I want to make sure that you're comfortable with this approach as well. And we can always go back to it if we feel if we're so inclined after we get through the first dialogue. We can always circle. We can always alternate.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just important for me. One is it's just be living, right? So it's like, if you have a strong instinct, let's go with it. If I have a strong instinct, let's go up with it. If we both have two opposing ones, let's just like have a fight and like
have a dialectic. Yeah.
Well,
it's perfect.
Think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I actually haven't read much of the dialogues directly. So this is going to be my first time. And you have a little bit of experience reading it in college and stuff like that we were talking about earlier. So just kind of getting one of the things that we were talking about was just how strangely disperse you like interpretations that you can have of what the dialogues are saying, right? Yeah. And like that they're just so, and that you were talking about that, like as a reading it in high school and college, you don't know that you're inside of an interpretation, but then you find out later that there's all these kind of dawns on you at some point that there's more than one way to read this text.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it's like the interpretation. It's cornucopic. There's so many of them. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches for a student. And that speaks to the importance of having good teachers. I was lucky enough, for the most part, to have a few very, very, very good teachers of Plato. And that's a luxury that not everyone has. In fact, I was just going to say that I think I told you before we started recording that the translator for the first dialogue that we're going to read was actually one of those instructors that I had when I was an undergraduate. So that's kind of fun for me as well.
Oh, so we're reading. Oh yeah, we should probably let them know which.
We should probably let them know. So we're starting with the Alcibiades, and I guess it helps to provide some context here. So for one thing, there are many, many proposed orders in which to read the dialogues. And the order I think we're going to follow is the Neoplatonic Order. That was an order that was grounded in the principle of self-knowledge and personal transformation, right? That the order of the dialogues, it's not chronological, it's not in order of authorship or anything like that. It's an order that was laid out as a mechanism for actually fostering and enacting the self-transformational process that's already implicit in the dialogues themselves. And the Alcibiades is exemplary of that process. Now, the Alcibiades, for some people, is actually apocryphal. The authorship of the Alcibiades is actually debated. There's not a clear consensus as to whether Plato actually authored it or not. But I think that's a modern debate. I don't think that debate was. I could be wrong about this, so don't take me as gospel. But I don't think that the debate around authorship was as true for the Neoplatonists as it is for sort of modern scholarship. But some people do think of it as apocryphal. But people also say that of some of the other dialogues and of some of Plato's epistles as well. Yeah. And some of those, especially the seventh epistle, are incredibly exemplary of what we have come to know as Platonic praxis in Platonic thinking, and it's so synonymous with our identification with Plato that the actual issue of authorship is secondary. I think we can think of it as secondary, because if it, I mean, I was having a discussion with John about this not too long ago, and we were saying, you know, whether or not it was actually written by Plato, it's still exemplary of Plato, and I think that's fundamentally the more important thing here. So yeah.
Wait, could I ask you what, when you said you were fortunate to have some really good teachers, right? What was it that, when you think about it now, like what was it that made them good teachers in your view of Plato? What's the difference that made that difference?
Well, it was different for each of them, but what they all shared in common was they shared an appreciation of the dialogic form.
Yeah.
The fact of the works being dialogues was central to their pedagogy, to the pedagogics of the way that they taught it.
Yeah.
And they in each case they were inclined to lean into the format as a way of understanding the philosophy. And so they weren't interested in just extracting out theories and expositing them, although they did do that in some cases, but the dialogic format was central to each of them. And the sense of the personal adaptation and the personal cultivation as a student that was implicit in the readings was also important to all of those. That's something they all shared in common. And they just had a way of they just also just had a gift for they were all just very well philosophically trained and had a gift for being able to expound on some of the ideas and riff off of them very well. Yeah, I was telling you that the sort of the political interpretations of Plato, that Plato's use in political theory and political philosophy was never really something that appealed to me very much, mostly because I felt that it abridged and kind of truncated Plato for its own purposes, co-opted him, and put him in categories that he seemed to want to circumscribe him in ways that he seemed, as though I could speak for Plato, but that in my mind he seemed not to want to be circumscribed by. So that never sat as well with me. But yeah, that was a feature they all had.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so Alcibiades, the other thing about Alcibiades perhaps that's important to say is that one of the ways in which it's exemplary is that the whole notion of Platonic love and the dialogical rapport that you and I have spoken so much about, and that John and others have spoken so much about, a lot of that, not exclusively, but Platonic love chiefly, is an idea that is derived from this dialogue in particular, because of the relationship between Socrates and Alcibiades, which is also something that's explored a bit in the Symposium. So I think that has something to do with why it comes first in the Neoplatonic order. There's a quote actually from Proclus that I have here that I thought might be good to read, and it's just in the introduction, which is to say, Proclus says, let this then be the start of philosophy and of the teaching of Plato, namely the knowledge of ourselves. Yeah. So.
God, so rich already.
So you and I have decided, so this dialogue is convenient in that it has two interlocutors, Socrates and Alcibiades. That's handy. So we can each take one and we'll alternate. So maybe with each video that we do, we'll swap roles. How does that sound?
So we could both get like equally like projected on as
equally Socratized.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know which actually I'm not sure which one I would want to be.
I don't know.
Into the dialogue to figure that
what's
out.
More painful, being Socrates or speaking with Socrates?
Yeah.
I guess we're about to find out.
Okay, so you want to just
good thing you're out of striking distance, guy.
Oh yeah. Anything else that we want to just say about just the order? So we're going to go with the Neoplatonic order, and you said one of the things that you had said is because it has so much of the personal transformational aspect involved. By the time it became Neoplatonism, like the sense of the Platonic dialogues and philosophy being so part of personal transformation, right, was part of the order and built into the order of this.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. More or
Cool.
less.
I just want to keep tracking that as part of the context is that we're going through here as we're reading it, because like I said in the beginning, like one of the things that it has my interest in this is the sense of looking at that there's something essential in dialogos, in philosophia, that as a practice that may not just be a good choice to make, but a necessity that may be lost. And so I want to kind of feel into that sense of like necessity and it being lost and bringing it back. Because on Thursday, you and I, me, you, John, and Jordan are going to meet. We're probably going to talk a lot about like actually bringing this into the world in some very concrete way. So that's just one of the horizons, that this is the background that I'm going to be reading to this in the foreground with.
Yeah. And then added to that background is obviously everything that's going on around us right now, right? The eruption of the COVID pandemic, the seclusion that everyone's been suddenly forced to undertake, and everyone's kind of holed up and cloistered in their homes for the most part, and that has really nothing to do with this undertaking insofar as we planned to do this long before this entered our consciousness. But I'm appreciating the coincidence right now.
Totally. Could I say something about an experience that I had that I've been actually wanting to talk with you about? So, I've been tracking everything on the news. However, I think it was Saturday evening was when I watched the I think it was NBC Nightly News, and it just went whoop. I was like, I got it. I got it at a deeper level.
Yeah.
That kind of figure ground kind of shift happened where it was like, I wonder how this is going to, is this real? Like, what's and all of a sudden something about watching it. Well, what was interesting about that was the whole day I had spent circling, because I had a 2-day course, which is where I was basically spending the whole day circling people. I probably circled the total like about 8 hours or so.
Wow.
And so, as often is the case, which I think is circling is basically kind of in a certain way is getting at what I'm imagining we're about to read here, right? This kind of, how I would put it is, to lead circles is to have your attention on the place that's the most stably unstable, right? What's most alive, right? And getting right down to that place where like chaos and order are right there, leaning into novelty. But if you lean too far forward, it loses its intelligibility. But if you lean too far back, you can't actually see what's happening, right?
Right.
But there's that emerging quality of, and I've just noticed doing that through circling, it seems to access all that flow kind of machinery. And so there's a certain kind of openness to novelty that's also deeply stable in a certain way. And I wasn't necessarily like in the presence of recognizing that or something, but I just got done with the course, and then I'm like, oh, so let me just check. And I listened to the news, but I listened to it from having all of those muscles or that machinery really opened and attuned. And it was so interesting. I like took in the crisis, and I could feel myself kind of implicitly welcoming in all of the chaos.
Yeah.
But like as it did, I felt this deeper sense of like refraining from gripping onto some kind of like contrived order to get comfortable. And instead I
Yes.
kept feeling myself dropping to a deeper level of context as the sense of the chaos started to come in, all the way down to this point of like where I almost felt like I somehow just went into this place of, I don't know how to call it, but like a a deeply abstract but viscerally um, system thinking immediacy that kind of came on. And then all of a sudden, it was like all of my thoughts were very, very cautious of making any conclusions,
Mm-hmm.
but just noticing where I needed to, like watching my awareness sit at a level of intelligibility
Right.
that could kind of see the background of that, right? It was
Right.
just a really interesting
Wow.
experience to find myself inside of. And it's funny because I didn't even quite realize it until the next morning when I'm listening to the people checking in for the next day of circling, where they're talking about their experience of the impact of that. And all of a sudden I just started to kind of realize like, oh my God. And I'd written that email to you guys to have the thing, and like all these things all of that was part of the flow of that experience.
Right.
So I don't know. I just wanted to share that with you.
I have this, as you were saying that, you conjured this image to my mind of you. This is going to seem a little silly, but you sort of riding the back of some great leviathan of a creature as it sinks deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the depths. And I have an image of you sort of poised nimbly on its back with one hand on a set of reins and one hand sort of out to the side, steadying yourself, just maintaining your balance with a kind of cautious curiosity as it sinks deeper and deeper and deeper.
It's a great image. And it very much was like that sense of being an ant that can see like an inch in front of it on the back of an elephant.
Yeah.
Right. And then just kind of recognizing that it actually isn't an elephant that I didn't know about that I was riding on. Like it was that kind of sense of both like total, like having a clear awareness of not knowing where I was, but more and more of an innate preparation for that not knowing in some way, and a responsiveness. I just thought that was just really interesting to kind of accidentally find myself in that space, seeing the world in its state just kind of come into that, having just basically done a yoga class like on all the deep layers of your psyche of where you sit.
Right.
Um,
Right.
So I just thought
that was beautifully described. And thank you for sharing that. Let's keep that perhaps in the let's keep that within sight of these dialogues as we proceed, because I think that there's something very important in behind that that's going to remain very relevant to us, spoken or unspoken, as we continue here.
All right, Socrates.
All right. Okay. So I'm Socrates this time, and then we'll swap. Okay. And incidentally, for any folks who might take an interest here, this is a translation of Alcibiades by D.S. Hutchinson.
And I'll put a link to the version that's a copy that's in actually Scribe, so you can download it for free.
Perfect. Great stroke of luck that we happened upon the same version.
Yep.
Okay. I was the first man to fall in love with you, son of Clinias. And now that the others have stopped pursuing you, I suppose you're wondering why I'm the only one who hasn't given up. And also why, when the others pestered you with conversation, I never even spoke to you all these years. Human causes didn't enter into it. I was prevented by some divine being, the effect of which you'll hear about later on. But now it no longer prevents me, so here I am. I'm confident it won't prevent me in the future either. I've been observing you all this time, and I've got a pretty good idea how you treated all those men who pursued you. They held themselves in high esteem, but you were even more arrogant and sent them packing, every single one of them. I'd like to explain the reason why you felt yourself so superior. You say you don't need anybody, for anything, since your own qualities from your body right up to your soul are so great, there's nothing you lack. In the first place, you fancy yourself the tallest and best-looking man around. And it's quite plain to see you're not wrong about that. Next, you think that yours is the leading family in your city, which is the greatest city in Greece. On your father's side, you have plenty of aristocratic friends and relations who would be of service to you if there was ever any need. And on your mother's side, your connections are no worse and no fewer. And you have Pericles, son of Xanthippus, whom your father left as a guardian to you and your brother. You think he's a more powerful ally than all of those people I mentioned put together. He can do whatever he likes, not only in this city, but anywhere in Greece, and also in many important foreign countries. I will also mention your wealth, but I think that's the least of all the reasons you hold yourself in high esteem. You bragged about all those things and got the better of your suitors. They didn't measure up and came off the worse. You knew what was going on. And so I'm sure you're wondering what I could possibly have in mind. Why don't I give up on you? The others have all been sent packing. So what do I hope to achieve by persisting?
Yes, Socrates. Perhaps you don't realize that you've just taken the words out of my mouth. I had already decided to come and ask you that very question. What could you have in mind? What do you hope to achieve by bothering me? Always making sure you're there wherever I am. Yes, I really do wonder what you might be up to, and I'd be very glad to find out.
So then you'll probably be eager to give me your full attention, since, as you say, you're keen to know what I have in mind. I take it that you'll listen carefully?
Yes, of course. Just tell me.
Watch out. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I found it as hard to stop as it was to start.
Tell me, please. I will pay attention.
Speak I must then. It's not easy to play the role of suitor with a man who doesn't give in to them. Nevertheless, I must summon up my courage and say what's on my mind.
So I just want to pause there for a second. So just like my senses, so just kind of follow along. So it was really interesting.
I'm already having fun.
Yeah, it's just like slipping into, I wanted to say so many narcissistic jokes, right? Like, but just,
it's hard not to ad-lib.
Yeah. I was like, I couldn't, what was interesting about like listening to Socrates is I couldn't tell, it was a combination of praising him, Socrates praising him, and dissing him at the same time.
He has a way with that.
Yeah. I couldn't, as the person being talking to, I couldn't quite tell which one was happening, right?
Yeah. Well, we're seeing some of that irony that thereafter he became so famous for, and that so many people noticed over the course of time. That ironical disposition is in full, is on display here in full.
So irony. So it's funny. I know what you mean when you say it, but when I kind of ask myself, what is irony? I don't quite exactly know what I understand about it. Is there a way of just distinguishing that quick?
Yeah, I think so. There's so much to it, but I think if I were to at least to begin. Mm-hmm. There's a cultivated distinction, a cultivated inequality between the appearance, the countenance of Socrates as presented, and the reality of what is meant and intimated. Right? There's a sense in which he is absent from his words. Something meaningful is absent from his words, and the absence is meaningful unto itself. Right? Yes. So that the fact that what is said is inidentical with the truth is purposefully inidentical with the truth. It is not inidentical for the purpose of ultimate deception, but thatinidenticality between what is said and what is meant is a way of fostering an attention to what is properly meant, an attention to what is properly true.
This is kind of like almost like a negative theology in there somewhere, like an absence,
Yeah.
absence that's a presence. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that operates at the level of the proposition, but it also operates at the level of the interpersonal dynamic. Right?
Yeah. Also, like, there probably wouldn't be humor without such a thing.
Yeah. Oh God. And he's such a great humorist. I mean, that's the thing that often gets overlooked, I think, is like these are funny.
Yeah.
They should be.
So far.
Right. I mean, that's why great humor is so flushed with irony, right? Precisely because it I mean, even contemporary comedians say a lot of things that are like that they say a lot of things ironically that are very, very provocative that we know they don't mean, but by virtue of saying it, they're ostending to something that has to remain implicit to the dialogue.
Yeah.
But that is ultimately its subject.
Interesting. Wow. All right. Of course.
Okay.
Just tell me.
Watch out. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I found it as hard to stop as it was to start.
Tell me, please. I will pay attention.
Okay. Speak I must, then. It's not easy to play the role of suitor with a man who doesn't give in to them. Nevertheless, I must summon up my courage and say what's on my mind. Alcibiades, if I saw that you were content with the advantages I just mentioned and thought that this was the condition in which you should live out the rest of your life, I would have given up on you long ago. At least, that's what I persuaded myself. But I'm going to prove to you in person what very different plans you actually have in mind. Then you'll realize how constantly I've been thinking about you. Suppose one of the gods asked you, Alcibiades, would you rather live with what you now have, or would you rather die on the spot if you weren't permitted to acquire anything greater? I think you'd choose to die. What then is your real ambition in life? I'll tell you. You think that as soon as you present yourself before the Athenian people, as indeed you expect to in a very few days, by presenting yourself, you'll show them that you deserve to be honored more than Pericles or anyone else who ever was. Having shown that, you'll be the most influential man in the city, and if you're the greatest here, you'll be the greatest in the rest of Greece, and not only in Greece, but also among the foreigners who live on the same continent as we do. And if that same God were then to tell you that you should have absolute power in Europe, but that you weren't permitted to cross over into Asia or get mixed up with affairs over there, I think you'd rather not live with only that to look forward to. You want your reputation and your influence to saturate all mankind, so to speak. I don't think you regard anybody as ever having been much to speak of, except perhaps Cyrus or Xerxes. And I'm not guessing that this is your ambition. I'm sure of it. Since you know that what I say is true, maybe you'll say, well, then, Socrates, what's this got to do with your point? You said you were going to tell me why you haven't given up on me. Yes, I will tell you, my dear son of Clinias and Dinomache. I think I'm butchering that. Dinomache? Something like that.
Good enough for me.
It is impossible to put any of these ideas of yours into effect without me. That's how much influence I think I have over you and your business. I think this is why the God hasn't allowed me to talk to you all this time. I've been waiting for the day he allows me. I'm hoping for the same thing from you as you are from the Athenians. I hope to exert great influence over you by showing you that I'm worth the world to you and that nobody is capable of providing you with the influence you crave, neither your guardian nor your relatives nor anybody else except me, with the gods' help, of course. When you were younger, before you were full of such ambitions, I think the God didn't let me talk to you because the conversation would have been pointless. But now he's told me to, because now you will listen to me.
So interesting. So I'm just noticing before I read here, I'm just noticing this in what Socrates just said here. Who Socrates is to me became shifted. Like now I'm wondering, reading this, who is Socrates, right? Like,
yes.
Like, who is he? I'm just noticing that he shifted in my
Yes.
view. And I'm
Yes.
also, the other thing that's there too is like I keep noticing, like, with the help of the gods. Like, I'm
Yeah.
also kind of wondering, that horizon is open too. Is like, what are the gods, and
Yes.
what do they do? So those are
Yeah.
open things that are in my mind as I read.
Right. Yeah. Their presence is in the wings. Right. And then there's this devouring ambition that he's speaking of that Alcibiades has, right? An ambition that would very happily, an ambition that would very happily engulf the whole world if he could. Socrates is entreating him to direct the whole of that ambition through this very, very, very narrow conversation. Take all of that you would direct out toward the world and devour, and concentrate it instead on me, and you'll find this equal in its ability to sate you, or greater in its ability to sate you. There's a bit of modal. There's a bit of modal alternation going on, right?
Yeah.
Because he wants to have it all. He wants to be had by all, and Socrates is saying, but you're. I mean, he's not using this terminology, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's a modal confusion that Alcibiades is trapped within, right? And Socrates is he's prodding it from the outside and trying to get its attention,
Right.
to redirect it to himself and all that he has to provoke.
Interesting. Very id. Alcibiades, it sounds like from Socrates, it's very id-like, like polyphysically perverse.
Yes. Well, I think that what we're seeing here is sort of the beginning of the transmutation of Eros.
Huh. Wow.
Right. Something like that. Okay.
So Alcibiades says, really, Socrates, now that you've started talking, you seem much more bizarre to me. And the guy. Than when you followed me in silence. Though you were very bizarre to look at then, too. Well, on the question of whether or not there are my ambitions, you seem to have made up your mind already. And no denial of mine will do anything to convince you otherwise. Fine. But supposing I really do have these ambitions, how will you help me achieve them? What makes you indispensable? Have you got something to say?
Are you asking if I can say some long speech like the ones you're used to hearing? No, that sort of thing's not for me. But I do think I'll be able to show you that what I've said is true, if only you were willing to grant me just one little favor.
Well, as long as you mean a favor that's not hard to grant, I'm willing.
That's also how I begin all my conversations.
Yeah, totally.
I'd be happy to help you, but it depends on how tall the order is.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's hard to answer questions?
No, I don't.
Then answer me.
Well, then ask me.
My question is whether you have in mind what I say you have in mind.
Let's say I do, if you like, so I can find out what you're going to say.
Okay, so now he's willing to play.
Yeah.
Right? Let's act as if. The acting as if, right?
Right.
The immersion into the play.
Right.
Right? Now there's an agreement. Now there's a dramaturgical agreement that they're going to play these respective roles, even though, ironically, they know they're not identical to them, right? So he's going to play a proposition knowing, at least right now, as is in situ, he does not necessarily identify with the proposition credulously, but he's going to play it anyway, right? So Socrates has successfully entreated him to play.
Yes. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Okay.
Right then. You plan, as I say, to come forward and advise the Athenians sometime soon. Suppose I stopped you as you were about to take the podium and asked, Alcibiades, what are the Athenians proposing to discuss? You're getting up to advise them because it's something you know better than they do, aren't you? What would you reply?
Yes, I suppose I would say it was something that I know better than they do.
So it's on matters you know about that you're a good advisor?
Of course.
Now, the only things you know are what you've learned from others or found out for yourself. Isn't that right?
What else could I know?
Could you ever have learned or found out anything without wanting to learn it or work it out for yourself?
No, I couldn't have.
Is that right? Would you have wanted to learn or work out something that you thought you understood?
Of course not.
So there was a time when you didn't think you knew what you now understand.
There must have been.
But I've got a pretty good idea what you've learned. Tell me if I've missed anything. As far as I remember, you learned writing and lyre playing and wrestling, but you didn't want to learn aulos playing. Those are the subjects that you understand, unless perhaps you've been learning something while I wasn't looking. But I don't think you have been, either by night or by day, on your excursions from home.
No, those are the only lessons I took.
Well then, is it when the Athenians are discussing how to spell a word correctly that you'll stand up to advise them?
Good God, I'd never do that.
Then is it when they're discussing the notes on the lyre?
No, never.
But surely they're not in the habit of discussing wrestling in the assembly.
Certainly not.
Then what will they be discussing? I presume it won't be building,
Of course not.
because a builder would give better advice on these matters than you.
Yes.
Nor will they be discussing divination, will they?
No.
Because then a diviner would be better at giving advice than you.
Yes.
Regardless of whether he's tall or short, or handsome or ugly, or even noble or common.
Of course.
And when the Athenians are discussing measures for public health, it will make no difference to them if their counselor is rich or poor, but they will make sure that their advisor is a doctor.
Of course.
I suppose that's because advice on any subject is the business not of those who are rich, but of those who know it.
Quite reasonably so.
Then what will they be considering when you stand up to advise them, assuming you're right to do so?
They'll be discussing their own business, Socrates.
You mean there are shipbuilding businesses? What sorts of ships should they be building?
No, Socrates, I don't.
I suppose that's because you don't understand shipbuilding. Am I right? Or is there some other reason?
No, that's it.
So what kind of their own business do you think they'll be discussing?
War, Socrates, or peace, or anything else, which is the business of the city.
Do you mean they'll be discussing who they should make peace with and who they should go to war with and how?
Yes.
But shouldn't they do that with the ones with whom it's better to?
Yes.
And when it's better?
Certainly.
And for as long a time as it's better?
Yes.
Now, supposing the Athenians were discussing who they should wrestle with and who they should spar with and how, who would be a better advisor, you or the trainer?
The trainer, I guess.
And can you tell me what the trainer has in view when he advises you who should or shouldn't wrestle with? Who you should or shouldn't wrestle with, and when and how? I mean, for example, that one should wrestle with those with whom it is better to wrestle. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And as much as it's better?
That's right.
And when it's better, right?
Certainly.
Let's take another example. When you're singing, you should sometimes accompany the song with lyre playing and dancing.
Yes, you should.
You should do so when it's better to, right?
Yes,
And as much as it's better?
I agree.
Really? Since you use the term better in both cases, in wrestling and in playing the lyre while singing, what do you call what's better in lyre playing as I call what's better in wrestling athletic? What do you call that?
I don't get it.
Then try to follow my example. My answer was, I think, what is correct in every case. And what is correct, I presume, is what takes place in accordance with the skill, isn't it?
Yes,
Wasn't the skill athletics?
of course.
I said that what's better in wrestling was athletic.
That's what you said.
Wasn't that well said?
I think so, anyway.
Come on then, it's your turn. It's partly up to you, surely, to keep our conversation going well. First of all, tell me what the skill is for singing and dancing and playing the lyre correctly. What is it called as a whole? Aren't you able to tell me yet?
Okay, so right there, I just want to pause. So interesting. So he's setting up a bunch of Socrates is like seems like I keep getting the sense he's picking up these dominoes, right? And each domino, he's saying that there's something similar through all those things that I want you to comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's showing that somehow Alcibiades does comprehend implicitly, but he's in some way he's almost kind of tricking him to noticing that he doesn't know how he knows that. Right. Interesting.
Right.
So
right.
I'm feeling this kind of foreground, background, going back and forth, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. I think that's exactly right.
There's something so familiar about this that I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
Familiar about what specifically?
I don't know. Just this, the line of the way the dialogue's going is like, well, this, and then there's this background sense of like, how do I know that? But not totally articulated. I don't know. There's something familiar about this foreground, background. Like, I think that it's just clearly plain as day, logically all fits together.
Yeah.
But there's some dim awareness that I didn't learn that anywhere, yet I know it. And this emergence, like those two things interpenetrating seems like maybe, I guess it's familiar in the sense of like how I come to start thinking about something.
Right.
That I can't tell you why I started thinking about it, but there's something I'm tracking that starts to notice that it doesn't understand something that it understands. Something like that.
Yes. A kind of remembrance.
Yeah.
Something finally coming into the light.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the light before. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And
but
Socrates' attention is precisely.
But also the sense in being Alcibiades, in some way there's an identity that Alcibiades has that is, by definition, has got to play along because he'll never give something up.
Yeah.
Right? There's a sense of which Socrates, you get the sense that he's kind of tricking him into seeing something that his identity would never let him see.
Yeah. Right. Well, because he's kind of seduced him. Maybe seduced is too strong a term at this point, but he's invited him to provisionally forego his egoic identity for the purpose of playing through the exercise. But what's going to happen as they play through the exercise is the egoic identity that he provisionally agreed to relinquish is going to become more and more and more distant in favor of the logos that is becoming more and more visible beneath the propositions of the conversation.
Oh, interesting. I just saw something right there in anticipation of that, of how this dialogue could be transformative for him, right? Mm-hmm. In that if he plays along, he'll play himself right into undoing what he thinks about himself.
Yes.
Which is, if my self-understanding changes, my identity changes. So this kind of way that identity and dialogue, how it can be transformative.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's like Socrates is teaching him, he's leading him through a series of very simple dance moves. And at some point, he's going to change the pattern of the move, right? Yeah. And that shift, after having learned all of these very basic steps and become comfortable with them, that shift is going to be, there's going to be something momentous about the transition. Yeah.
Wow. This is so fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Like, there's so much going on here. I'm also
There's a lot going on, because then, see, in addition to the sense of irony that Socrates and Alcibiades have between each other, I mean, Socrates has the sense of irony that he's presenting one way, knowing that he's going to pivot the other. But as the reader, we're also appreciative of the irony too, because we see what also is a dramatic irony, a classic form of dramatic irony, because we see what Alcibiades doesn't at this point, right?
right.
Because familiar as we are with Socrates, we have a sense of what's going to start happening more and more.
Yes.
And Alcibiades, there's a certain, even though as a personage is known to be a bit reprobate, there's a certain innocence with which he's entered into this discourse. So it seems, at least at face value.
You know, it's interesting because it seems with like deep forms of identification, right? Where I'm insulated in some way and I'm righteous or I'm dug into some position. The tightness itself is, in a sense, somehow it knows what we know as we're reading it. We can see Alcibiades' disintegration about to come that he's naive to, but the thing that's tight about the identity already is anticipating that integration or that disintegration. So on some level, its seeming stability is dependent on the thing it's most afraid of to be stable.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to kind of feel that possibility in reading it. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna
yeah.
It's just kind of that sense of just, and which is interesting to look at that in terms of, Plato on some level wrote these as a process of transformation that we're going through, demonstrating that like even in us reading it or acting it out, that awareness of the trickery that we're present to as the readers is part of, is an accident.
That's right. It most certainly is no accident.
Right.
Yeah. Even though it will occur to us accidentally, you know what I mean? There's yet another level to that too, because we are also much like Alcibiades and Socrates have agreed to enter into this dramatis. We too have been making the same choice, right, with certain foreknowing knowledge, and yet the accidents that trip these two will also trip us. The accidents will occur to us even though we've knowingly engaged ourselves to them. Right. And that's the quality of aspiration at work, right? It's volitional insofar as we're entering into it knowingly to some degree, and yet it will still occur to us in some ways as though we did not know. Serious play. Yeah, precisely. Serious play. So I think we were at Alcibiades says, no, I can't. Right. Well, try it this way. Who are the goddesses to whom this skill belongs? Do you mean the muse, Socrates? I do indeed. Don't you see? What's the name of the skill that's named after them? I think you mean music. Yes, I do. Now, what is quote, correctly? Interesting, it's an adverb there. What is correctly for what takes place in accordance with this skill? In other cases, I told you what correctly is for what takes place in accordance with that skill. Now it's your turn to say something similar in this case. How does it take place? I think I'm going to read that one again, Guy. Yeah. Well, now what is correctly for what takes place in accordance with this skill? In the other cases, I told you what correctly is for what takes place in accordance with the skill. So now it's your turn to say something similar in this case. How does it take place? Musically, I
I think.
Ah, a good answer. Come on now. What do you call what's better in both going to war and keeping the peace? In these last two examples, you said that what was better was more musical and more athletic, respectively. Now try to tell me what's better in this case, too.
I really can't do it.
But surely it's disgraceful if when you're speaking and giving advice about food, saying that a certain kind is better than another and better at a certain time and in a certain quantity, and someone should ask you, what do you mean by better, Alcibiades? You could tell him in that case that better was healthier, though you don't even pretend to be a doctor. And yet, in a case where you do pretend to understand and are going to stand up and give advice as though you knew, if you aren't able, as it seems likely, to answer the question in this case, won't you be embarrassed? Won't that seem disgraceful?
Yes, certainly.
Then think about it and try to tell me what the better tends towards in keeping the peace or in waging war with the right people.
I just want to pause there. That strikes me. Then think about it and try to tell me what better tends toward. That tend toward. Just, I don't know that. Back to me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
In keeping the peace or in waging war with the right people. The tending toward.
What the better tends towards.
Yeah.
What is common? What is common among these? What is common among the correctly answers in each case?
Yeah.
What do they have in common? So
there's this kind of like toward has this facing quality, like I'm tending toward, and it seems to have this kind of future quality to it, like something's coming that I'm tending toward.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was good, Guy. Thank you for pausing us on that. I think that's important.
Yeah. Okay. Alcibiades says, I do. We say that they're playing some.
I think you jumped a line. Waging war with the right people.
Okay, there we go. I'm thinking, but I can't get it.
But suppose we're at war with somebody. Surely you know what treatment we accuse each other of when we enter into a war and what we call it.
I do. We say they're playing some trick on us, or attacking us, or taking things away from us.
Hold on. How do we suffer from each of these treatments? Try to tell me how one way differs from another way.
When you say way, Socrates, do you mean justly or unjustly?
Precisely.
Okay, so right there.
There are two ways of reading that question, right?
Yeah.
Do you one way is, do you mean justly or unjustly, or do you mean justly or unjustly?
And he says precisely. So like it's like there is that sense of that irony of, it's funny, I've never quite thought about it so explicitly as irony being presencing something by its absence, right? And then holding that absence as it grows. And then he goes, precisely. And somehow I just felt the tickle of that not, or
yes.
the un, or the non, or something
yes.
like that, right?
Yes.
So interesting.
Yes.
How does that, let's see. I do. We say they're playing some trick on us. Wait a minute, is that?
That's fine. Let's go from there. That's fine.
Okay, cool. I do. We say they're playing some trick on us, or attacking us, or taking things away from us.
Hold on. How do we suffer from each of these treatments? Try to tell me how one way differs from another way.
When you say way, Socrates, do you mean justly or unjustly?
Precisely.
but surely really funny.
I mean, it's no wonder they killed him.
Yeah. But surely that makes all the difference in the world.
Really? Who will you advise the Athenians to wage war on? Those who are treating us unjustly, or those who are treating us justly?
That's a hard question you're asking. Even if someone thought it was necessary to wage war on people who were treating us justly, he wouldn't admit it.
Because I think that because I think that wouldn't be lawful.
It certainly wouldn't.
Nor would it be considered a proper thing to do.
No.
So you would also frame your speech in these terms.
I'd have to.
Then this better, quote, better, I was just asking you about. When it comes to waging war or not, on whom to wage war and on whom not to, and when not to, this better turns out to be the same as more just, doesn't it?
It certainly seems so.
But how could it, my dear Alcibiades? Don't you realize that this is something you don't understand? Or perhaps when I wasn't looking, you've been seeing some teacher who taught you how to tell the difference between the more just and the less just. Have you? Well, who is he? Tell me who he is so that you can sign me up with him as well.
Stop teasing me, Socrates.
I'm not. I'll swear by friendship, yours and mine, I'd never perjure myself by him. Him referring to friendship, which is one of the in this case an aspect of a deity. Friendship being a deity. That's why it's a him. I'll swear by friendship, yours and mine, I'd never perjure myself by him. So tell me who he is if you can.
And if I can't, don't you think I might know about justice and injustice some other way?
Yes, you might. You just found it out.
Well, don't you think I might find it out?
Yes, of course, if you investigate the matter.
And don't you think I might investigate it?
Yes, I do, if you thought you didn't know.
And didn't I once think that? Oh, good.
It gets just like it goes pure farce sometimes, isn't it?
Right.
Okay, why don't we actually? I actually recommend we go through that again.
Okay.
I'll go from the top. Tell me who he is so you can sign me up as well. Top of the page.
Okay.
Tell me who he is so that you can sign me up with him as well.
Wait a minute. Like, I think tell me who he is. Sign.
So you can go from stop teasing me, Socrates.
Okay. Let me just find that place here.
Sorry, Guy, I didn't mean to throw a wrench in this.
How about we start by?
It's just a few lines up.
Oh, okay. How about we go? I don't think I might invest. And don't you think I might investigate it?
Yes, I do. If you thought you didn't know.
And didn't I once think that? Pause right there. That one's
sure.
Like that one really strikes me. Like now he's asking Socrates whether or not he just thought that.
Right.
That there's something about that just really
Yeah.
examples both a confusion, like a radical confusion, right? Because
Yeah.
I thought it or not. Like I'm the one that has authority, but all of a sudden, like I'm asking you whether or not I once
I
thought that.
That's right.
So
That's
there,
right. And as soon as it occurs to him, yeah, because insisting, yeah, I once thought that. Exactly. You
yeah,
did.
yes,
Good answer. Okay. Now we're on to something. Let's go
yeah.
from there.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Because you did learn it by some other means. By
Yeah,
what means? Okay. You admitted it. Now
yeah.
didn't I once think that? Yeah, good. A fine answer.
Interesting. So like, it's interesting that the roles here are interpenetrating. Like, and also, didn't I once? He's answering Socrates with a question, which
Right.
what Socrates has been doing to him.
Right.
There's this kind of
Right. And it's about stumbling upon the right question.
yeah,
Right. I mean, the questions are what they're trading right now. But Socrates, as you can tell, he's trying to maneuver him into the position to ask the right question. And then, of course, he does.
Right.
Approximately ask the right question. I think it's also. I also think it's important that the god of friendship, as a god, as a persona, has been conjured here for a moment.
Right. Yeah, that
Right.
struck me too.
Yeah, that's why I put a point on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Personifying it. Okay.
A fine answer. Can you tell me when this was? When you didn't think you knew about justice and injustice? Well, was it last year that you were looking into it? Sorry, let me take that again. Well, was it last year that you were looking into it and didn't think you knew? Or did you think that you knew? Answer me truthfully, or else our conversation will be a waste of time.
Yes. I thought I knew.
Didn't you think the same thing 2 years ago? And 3 years ago? And 4?
I did.
But surely before that you were a boy, weren't you?
Yes.
Well, now at that point, I'm sure you thought you knew.
How can I be sure of that?
When you were a boy, I often observed you at school and other places. And sometimes when you were playing knucklebones or some other game, you'd say to one or another of your playmates very loudly and confidently, not at all like someone who was at a loss about justice and injustice, that he was a lousy cheater and wasn't playing fairly. Isn't that true?
But what was I to do, Socrates, when somebody cheated me like that?
Do you mean what should you have done if you didn't actually know then whether or not you were being cheated?
But I did know, by Zeus. I saw clearly that they were cheating me.
So it seems that even as a child, you thought you understood justice and injustice.
Yes. And I did understand.
At what point did you find it out? Surely it wasn't when you thought you knew.
Of course not.
Let's pay attention to that line for a second, actually.
Okay.
At what point did you find it out? Surely it wasn't when you thought you knew.
Huh.
Classic Socratic line.
Right. God, what is that revealing? God, that's revealing something. I'm having that familiar sense of something being disclosed that feels so familiar, but if I try to turn towards it and explain it, it goes right away.
Right.
Actually, that's right. That's kind of what's happening with Alcibiades.
I think so.
Very funny. Very funny.
I think so.
Socrates.
Very funny indeed, Alcibiades.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that again, then you can go forward. At what point did you find it out? Surely it wasn't when you thought you knew.
Of course not.
Then when did you think you didn't know? Think about it. You won't find any such time.
By Zeus, Socrates, I really can't say.
So it isn't but by finding it out that you know it.
Oh. That's not very likely.
But surely, did you want to step in, Guy?
No.
Okay. But surely you just finished saying that it wasn't by being taught either that you knew it. So if you neither found it out nor were taught it, how and where did you come to know it?
Maybe I gave you the wrong answer. I knew it by finding it out myself.
Then how did it happen?
I suppose I learned it in the same way as other people.
That brings us back to the same argument. From whom? Do tell me.
From people in general.
When you give the credit to people in general, you're falling back on teachers who are no good.
What? Aren't they capable of teaching?
No, they can't even teach you what moves to make or not to make in knuckle bones. And yet that's a trivial matter, I suppose, compared with justice. What, don't you agree?
Yes.
So although they can't teach trivial things, you say they can teach more serious things.
I think so. At any rate, they can teach a lot of things that are more important than knuckle bones.
Like what?
Well, for example, I learned how to speak Greek from them. I couldn't tell you who my teacher was, but I gave the credit to the very people you say are no good at teaching. And pause one second. So, you know what it's kind of coming to me here is Heidegger, right? This sense of how Heidegger often, for at least for me, there's something familiar about this in how Heidegger kind of reveals this pre-apprehension. For me to ask the question for example, to ask a question presupposes knowing something for which I don't know something about. What is
right?
If you ask me to account for in any present at hand object, directly looking at it oriented way of knowing, it just disappears. I can't explain it, but the ability to hold that hand, right,
yes,
is can't account for itself as an object. So I'm just
exactly.
kind of feeling that kind of like a hermeneutic, phenomenological bleeding back and forth. And I'm literally gripped as we're reading this. I'm like,
yeah,
what? How did I know that? Like, well, it must be.
Yeah.
Like, of course.
What's the a priori here? Yeah, I think. I mean, I in many ways, it's like Socrates to Alcibiades. It could much of this could be enfolded to the question. You know, what's draw your attention to the soles of your feet. You've never drawn your attention to the soles of your feet before, have you? Right? You know not the ground on which you stand. On what ground do you stand? How long have you been standing there? Oh, I don't know. I'm just standing here. I know, but how long? Right? How long have you been standing here? Well, I don't know how long I've been standing here. Well, you're clearly standing here, right? What does it feel like to stand? And right, what's the point at which you acquired this knowing, right? How do you source yourself as a knower?
Yeah.
Right? And of course he's struggling to, right? Find the ground of your knowing, its origin, and it can't like it's
yes,
and you can feel it's so effortful that you can like that. I mean, that's why it descends into such amusing ripostes, because it's like trying to get to the he can't draw his sense of presence down far enough to where Socrates is trying to indicate.
In fact, the thing that is interesting is that it's interesting. Something is becoming more stable and something's becoming unstable. It's interesting. I think what he's doing here is Alcibiades' normal way of knowing is becoming less and less stable, because he's being shown that he knows something that his knowing can't disclose. Yes. So there's this instability that's actually kind of funny, right?
Yes.
But it's interesting. On this other way, there's something, whatever it is that's coming into more stability, is making itself known, but isn't revealing it through his old way of knowing. So I can feel that a new strange attractor starting to organize around and do some kind of state shift or something. Or
exactly. I think that's well put. He's backing into something.
Yeah,
he's backing into himself. He's backing into something of himself,
and that is
he's never been able to back into.
That's something interesting in itself, that I am that which I back into. And everything, his other way of knowing is so forward looking, right? But to answer the question, I have to back away from what I know into myself to find out that I already knew, but I can't account for it.
Right.
Fucking interesting.
Right. And Socrates is essentially leading him in these backward steps. But you were saying before about how there's a bidirectionality, right? There's a forward and a backward motion simultaneously, and that plugs into this metaphor perfectly.
So now I'm noticing it. Like if I just ring the tone on this feeling right here, this is what I was talking about in circling. Like whatever that spot is where you don't quite know, but you know something's falling apart and something's becoming more stable and you don't know what it is, but it's really fucking interesting. Like you're just right there. Very similar. This is very similar to that feeling I get. I think what circling has me practice doing, which is interesting because it's like, it's dialogical. It's relationship.
Yes. Exactly. Because as he draws him closer to the center of his presumed belief, the center of his presumed belief is ultimately going to be an aporia. And so the presence of the aporia, which is the same presence in absentia we were talking about, ironically, that presence engulfs him more and more and more as he backs into it. Right at the center of those presumed beliefs is the aporetic darkness. So
aporetic. Can you say something about aporetic? Like, is there a
aporetic? Just the adjectival form of aporia, which is to say the precipice beyond which your knowing trails off.
Huh. Interesting.
Right. Opens into a kind of it's the dissolution of knowing.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But seems to it,
but not a nihilistic disillusion, right? It's not a nihilistic disillusion. It's right, the unseen but ever present structures of belief bottom out somewhere.
Yeah,
kind of point at which they bottom out is the aporia.
Oh, okay. Is that similar? Is that probably something similar to like what a koan, like a Zen koan?
Yes, very much so. I think you could make. Yeah, I don't know that I understand the philosophy of the koan well enough to make an identity claim here, but I think it seems to me that there's something very, very similar going on. If not the same thing, that the koan is designed to induce an aporia, right? Designed to dissolve your proposition, because the whole point of a koan is that you can't thread a koan with propositions. Right. Propositions will boil away, as it were.
This is really like
propositions can't get a purchase around a koan, right? And in the same way, the propositions can't get a purchase on the aporia.
Wow. This is so being. This is really about, like, I'm just kind of really getting the sense, like, the emergence of being as it withdraws and becoming present to what isn't here is somehow having it be here in this way that can't become an object, a being, but reveals the thing that is doing something as it withdraws, and tuning into that something that as it withdraws, you can feel its intelligibility. So good.
Tuning is exactly right.
So good. I'm starting to get why people have been talking about Socrates for
all this time.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where were we here?
I can't remember.
Let's see. Yes, my noble friend, people in general are good teachers. Okay, I think let's see. I think so. At any rate,
Mm.
they can teach a lot of things that are more important than knuckle bones.
Like what?
For example, I learned how to speak Greek from them. I couldn't tell you who my teacher was, but I give the credit to the very people you say are no good at teaching.
Yes, my noble friend, people in general are good teachers of that, and it would be only fair to praise them for their teaching,
Why?
because they have what it takes to be good teachers of the subject.
What do you mean by that?
Don't you see that somebody who is going to teach anything must first know it himself? Isn't that right?
Of course.
And don't people who know something agree with each other, not disagree?
Yes.
If people disagree about something, would you say that they know it?
Of course not.
Then how could they possibly be teachers of it?
They couldn't possibly.
Well, then, do you think that people in general disagree about what wood is or stone is? If you ask them, don't they give the same answers? Don't they reach for the same things when they want to get some wood or some stone? And similarly for all other such cases. I suppose this is pretty much what you mean by understanding Greek, isn't it?
Yes.
So they agree with each other in these cases, as we said, and with themselves when acting privately. But don't they also agree in public? Cities don't disagree with each other and use different words for the same thing, do they?
No.
So it's likely that they would make good teachers of these things.
Yes.
So if we wanted somebody to know these things, we'd be right to send him to lessons given by these people in general.
Certainly.
Now, if we wanted to know not just what men or horses are like, but which of them could and couldn't run, would people in general be able to teach this as well?
Of course not.
Isn't the fact that they disagree with each other about these things enough to show you that they don't understand them and are not foursquare teachers of them?
Yeah.
Foursquare teachers of them?
Yes, it is.
Now, if we wanted to know not just what men are like, but what sick and healthy men are like, would people in general be able to teach us?
Of course not.
And if you saw them disagreeing about it, what would show you that they were bad teachers of it?
Yes, it would.
Sorry, I misread that. I formed it as a question. Let me go for it again. And if you saw them disagreeing about it, that would show you that they were bad teachers of it.
Yes, it would.
Very well, then. Does it seem to you that people in general actually agree among themselves or with each other about just and unjust people and actions?
Not in the slightest, Socrates.
Really? Do they disagree a huge amount about these things?
Very much so.
I don't suppose you've ever seen or heard people disagreeing so strongly about what is healthy and unhealthy that they fight and kill each other over it, have you?
Of course not.
But I know you've seen this sort of dispute over questions of justice and injustice, and even if you hadn't seen it, at least you've heard about it from many other people, especially Homer, since you've heard the Iliad and the Odyssey, haven't you?
I certainly have. Of course, Socrates.
Aren't these poems about disagreements over justice and injustice?
Yes.
It was over this sort of agreement, it was over this sort of disagreement that the Achaeans and the Trojans fought battles and lost their lives, as did Odysseus over the suitors of Penelope.
You're right.
I suppose the same is true of those Athenians and Spartans and Betuans who died at Tanagra or later at Coronea, including your own father. The disagreement that caused those battles and those deaths was none other than a disagreement over justice and injustice, wasn't it?
You're right.
Are we to say that people understand something if they disagree so much about it that in their disputes with each other they resort to such extreme measures?
Obviously not.
But aren't you giving credit to teachers of this sort who, as yourself admit, have no knowledge?
I guess I am.
Well, then, given that your opinion wavers so much, and given that you obviously neither found it out yourself nor learned it from anyone else, how likely is it that you know about justice and injustice?
From what you say, anyways, it's not very likely.
See, there you go again, Alcibiades. That's not well said.
What do you mean?
You say that I say these things.
What? Aren't you saying I don't understand justice and injustice?
No, not at all.
Well, am I?
Yes,
How?
here's how. Here's how. If I asked you which is more, one or two, would you say two?
I would.
By how much?
By one.
Then which of us is saying that two is more than one?
I am.
Wasn't I asking and weren't you answering?
Yes.
Who do you think is saying these things? Me, the questioner, or you, the answerer?
Okay, pause right there. Okay, so pause right there. So like, oh, okay, how did we, okay, so we end, now that's very funny, Socrates. Hey, I just want to look here, where am I? Like, something new just happened there, or it's just something got revealed. Where, let's see, so Socrates says, how do you think, who do you think is saying these things? Me, the questioner, or you, the answer? Okay, so he's revealing, again, there's this kind of bleeding, there's this transference of like who's asking the question and who's answering and who knows and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Who do you think, now he's posing a question, who do you think is saying these things? So he's saying, he's basically putting a question mark on who when I was speaking as Alcibiades, he's putting a question on something that should be certain, right?
That's right.
You, the questioner, or you, and then saying, well, who is the one that's speaking right now?
Yeah.
So now I'm starting to get this sense of the of this third. Is this the introduction of the third of the overarching relationship starting to?
I think so. It's the question of who is speaking is an important one here, because what Socrates effectively does, I think, in this moment is he does that to him, right? Wake up, wake back up, because he starts to his answers are becoming more and more rote, more and more automated. He's being spoken through, but he's not actually speaking.
Yeah.
And so by repositioning the questioner and the answerer, Socrates is bringing him back to himself very abruptly by saying, "Well, you're the one who was answering all of these questions. Don't presume you're speaking through me, right? You're speaking, so speak, right? Awaken to your speech and become conscious of the beliefs that you are giving voice to, the perspective that you're giving voice to, right? Awaken to it. Own it, in a sense, right? Because there's a sense in which Alcibiades is disowning, dissociated, disidentified from the propositions that are washing through him, right? In the carriage of Socrates. And Socrates is repositioning that perspective so that he comes to himself and realizes that he's become voice for a perspective or witness to a perspective that he hasn't been properly conscious to until this moment of repositioning.
It's almost like the propositions that you don't own you.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. He is had by the propositions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
I gotta learn. I'm not Botians. I think Botians who died at Tanagra. I gotta look that up later. Anyway, yeah. Okay.
So Socrates, go ahead and read. Who do you think is saying these? So read that again.
Who do you think is saying these things? Me, the questioner, or you, the answerer?
I am.
And what if I asked you how to spell Socrates, and you told me? Which of us would be saying it?
I would.
Come then, give me the general principle. When there's a question and an answer, who is the one saying things, the questioner or the answerer?
The answer, I think, Socrates.
That would be my answer too.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, though. I'm actually going to repeat that. I think it's a heck of a question. There's so much more in that question than meets the eye.
Yeah.
Come then, give me the general principle. When there's a question and an answer, who is the one saying things? The questioner or the answerer?
The answerer, I think, Socrates.
Wasn't I the questioner in everything just now?
Yes.
And weren't you the answerer?
I certainly was.
Well, then, which of us said what was said?
Okay, pause. I just want to pause on that one. Hang on. I don't know if I have anything to say.
This is a great question.
Yeah.
I think the more you dig into that question, the deeper the well beneath it becomes.
The feeling of realizing that the true speaker may be anonymous, or at least ambiguous, is leaving. Yeah, it's leaving. It's like there's. Yeah, it's funny. I'm feeling again this. It's so interesting. I had no idea about this, but like, what's becoming more present is what I don't know somehow.
Yes.
Like it's actually. I think that's why I wanted to pause and go, wait a minute.
Yes.
I wanted to feel what was present. And it is
Yes.
precisely the thing I don't understand. Like I don't know, but it does have a presence to it.
Yes.
And you pause.
Yes.
Interesting.
Who am I to this question, right? Who am I before this question?
Yeah.
Is I think implicitly is being asked, right?
Yeah. Who am I before this question? Just the question somehow gives the answer right there at the same time.
Right.
Well,
Right.
so it's funny. It's like I notice my attention goes, who am I before this question? And then I end up kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel pregnant somehow with something. That's what the word is. I feel pregnant or something, or the air's pregnant, or the space is pregnant, or something's pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Midwifery.
Midwifery. Right? Because they're both starting to identify so much with the process that the sense of distinct identity within the process is starting to dissolve, I think, right? Wait, who am I in this process? His identification with the process itself is now becoming so indistinct that that both of them are somehow dwelling midway between the question and the answer.
Yeah.
As they take it in turns.
Yeah.
And that's why when he rotates the roles, or at least throws them back into sharp relief, they're still somehow suspended in tension between them, the both of them. Right. Socrates knowingly, of course, and Alcibiades unknowingly.
You're getting this sense of just, I've always thought a good metaphor for the ego is a sphincter. Right? Because it's like, and especially I thought about this in times of just when I would do years ago when I would do these like really intense psychedelic journeys, like with a lot of intention with the teacher and everything. There was always this kind of very aware thing that you're going to be taken somewhere, but that whether or not it was painful is whether or not you could let yourself be taken, right? But the act of trying to let go was a holding on, right?
Right.
So then you realize you're holding on, and then you try to let go and you hold on more, right?
Right.
And that sense of that, I feel very similar as I'm talking about this. It's like I'm starting to, well, this is kind of strange. It's a little graphic, but like I have this sense of like some kind of egoic sphincter is starting to relax. Right?
That's an analog worthy of Socrates himself.
Yeah, totally.
Alcibiades, is the ego not like a sphincter?
Yeah.
Yes, of course it is, Socrates.
And what just answered that question? And there's that, because there is a quality of like, to contract part of it is to contract the whole of it, right?
Right.
And that it seemed like that there's something about going back and forth in this that is, something's getting, another sensibility is opening up, and it is really interesting how it feels present in reading it. Like, like what he's going through, I'm going through on some level.
Absolutely.
This is so interesting.
Absolutely.
Very funny, Socrates. Okay. So let's see. You want to go? I wonder how long we've been going now.
I don't know. I don't know how long we've been chatting for probably about 2 hours. We haven't been recording that whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour and a half. I don't know.
Go down
let me take a look and actually just go ahead a little bit. See how much is actually left of the dialogue. Oh, there's a fair bit.
Okay.
There's a fair bit.
A couple
Okay.
pages.
Well, let's not have the ambition to devour the whole thing right now. But what do you think? Couple more pages?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, we'll find a natural endpoint for now.
Right. So where were we at? I am.
Okay. So how about I repeat? I had this book balanced perfectly. Now it's sliding around. Hang on.
Why don't you start from the top of page 569?
Okay.
Now, and I'll start. I am.
That I am. And what if I asked you how to spell Socrates and you told me? Which of us would be saying it?
I would.
Come then, give me the general principle. When there's a question and an answer, who is the one saying things, the questioner or the answerer?
The answerer, I think, Socrates.
Wasn't I the questioner in everything just now?
Yes.
And weren't you the answerer?
I certainly was.
Well, then which of us said what was said?
From what we've agreed, Socrates, it seems that I did.
And what was said was that Alcibiades, the handsome son of Clinias, doesn't understand justice and injustice, though he thinks he does, and that he is about to go to the assembly and advise the Athenians on what he doesn't know anything about. Was that it?
Apparently.
Then it's just like in Euripides, Alcibiades. You heard it from yourself and not from me. I'm not the one who says these things. You are. Don't try to blame me. And furthermore, you're quite right to say so. This scheme you have in mind, teaching what you don't know and haven't bothered to learn, your scheme, my good fellow, is crazy.
Actually, Socrates, I think the Athenians and the other Greeks rarely discuss which course is more just or unjust. They think that sort of thing is obvious, so they skip over it and ask which one would be advantageous to do. In fact, though, what's just is not the same, I think, as what's advantageous. Many people have profited by committing great injustices, and others, I think, got no advantage from doing the right thing.
So, even if just and advantageous things happen to be completely different, surely you don't think you know what's advantageous for people and why, do you?
What's to stop me, Socrates? Unless you're going to ask me all over again, who I learned it from or how I found out. Sorry. Let me read that over again. What's to stop me, Socrates? Unless you're going to ask me all over again who I learned it from or how I found it out myself.
What a way of carrying on. If you say something wrong, and if there's a previous argument that can prove it was wrong, you think you ought to be given some new and different proof, as if the previous one were a worn-out scrap of clothing that you refuse to wear again. No, you want an immaculate, brand new proof. I'll pass over your anticipation of my argument and ask you, all the same, how did you come to understand what is advantageous? Who was your teacher? And in my one question, ask everything I asked you before. Clearly, this will put you in the same position again. You won't be able to prove that you know what is advantageous, either by finding it out or by learning it. But since you've got a delicate stomach and wouldn't enjoy another taste of the same argument, I'll pass over this question of whether or not you know what is advantageous for the Athenians. But why don't you prove whether the just and the advantageous are the same or different? You can question me, if you like, as I questioned you, or else work it out for yourself in your own argument.
No, Socrates, I don't think I'd be able to work it out in front of you.
Well then, my good sir, imagine that I'm the assembly and the people gathered there. Even there, you'll have to persuade them one by one, isn't that right?
Yes.
If somebody knows something, don't you think you can persuade people about it one by one as well as together? Take the school teacher. Don't you think he persuades people about letters individually as well as collectively?
Yes.
And won't the same person be able to persuade people about numbers individually as well as in groups?
Yes.
He would be a mathematician, somebody who knows about numbers.
Clear, certainly.
So won't you also be able to persuade an individual person about the things you can persuade a group of people about?
Probably.
Obviously, these are things you know about.
Yes.
Is there any difference between an orator speaking to the people and an orator speaking in this sort of conversation, except insofar as the former persuades them all together, while the latter persuades them one by one?
I guess not.
Well then, since it's plain that the same person can persuade individuals as well as groups, practice on me and try to prove that what is just is sometimes not advantageous.
Stop pushing me around, Socrates. I want to say this as a positive. So I'm starting to kind of peek its way through. It's something about listening and speaking is starting to show itself. That because I think what he's doing, he's putting different listenings in front of him, and I think I'm starting to kind of I don't know. I'm starting to I think I'm starting to get something about that whatever it is that I say is in some way attuned to a listening, right? That is as much generative of the answer as the person who's saying it.
Right.
Right.
That goes back to what you notice when you notice the emphasis on tending towards, speaking into. What we're speaking to the hearkening ear. The hearkening ear is determinate of the speech, insofar as it contains and constricts the number of pathways that will be available to that particular proposition. Right. Speaking into a certain constrained possibility in each distinct thread of the conversation.
Right. So now I'm starting to get this sense of self-world, agent arena, how you kind of always already arrive as a speaker speaking into a listening, as a listening being spoken to, that everything has this kind of quality of a conversation on some level.
Right, exactly. So every time Socrates resituates the conversation and alters the topic, what he does is he prefits the scope of the conversation with a set of provisions that were different than they were a moment ago. When the situation changes, the characterization and the identities of the questioner and answerer also slightly changed. So in each case, the world, as it were, of the dialogue is changing on a sort of a moment-to-moment basis.
Right.
Almost in a cascade.
almost like if you were to grab like, these existential words, you just grab the hyphen and you just turned it at the hyphen. You'd still have the hyphen, but just all the positions change, but yet the hyphen is the thing that's actually the most true.
Ooh, very good. I like that. I like that. I like that metaphor. I like that metaphor. That's good. Well, that's a classic paradigmatic in the semiotic sense, a classic paradigmatic change, right?
Yeah.
As though you're changing the syntax,
Yeah.
the syntax of a sentence, right? You swap one word out for another, it changes both the denotation and the connotation of the meaning of that sentence. And in a way, Socrates is doing something analogous to that. Or Plato is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing something analogous to that in these conversations, that he's paradigmatically swapping and exchanging and playing with the syntax of the dialogue, and seeing how the world that is constrained within that dialogue changes as a consequence of that, those syntactic exchanges.
Well, why is it so ecstatic though? What is
For
it?
us or for them?
Well, I want to say for us, like, but it seems a property of the experience. I don't think it's subjective. There's something about, well, the ecstasis, right? To stand, it is an interesting word. Is stand out and over, yet without leaving, you're standing out of. Yeah, there is that kind of that it's not just changing it and noting it, but in noting how something is revealed as you grab the hyphen and you turn it, right? And you change the syntax. Do you see what you were seeing with, but then that somehow is transformative, right?
Right. It's like you don't simply understand the sorry.
No, keep going.
Yes, it's like you don't understand it's like, well, what happens is you don't simply understand the meaning that you've now been voiced with as a consequence of that paradigmatic change. You understand the meaning that you've just abandoned, that you've just left vacant.
Huh. And then you don't but then oh, interesting.
Again, backing away. Let's go back to the metaphor, right? We're backing into something. And the relief of the landscape before us is increasing in its breadth as we back away from it, right? Socrates is leading us backwards into something. And so the vista, as it were, changes, widens.
But I can't help but think of Piaget, who I think borrows it from Hegel, but the sense of development, right? Of the Piaget.
Sorry, you lagged there for a second. What did you say?
Well, I can't help but think, as we're talking about using this backing into something, about this sense of the way that Keegan, who is grounded in Piaget. So Piaget basically looks at development is that you see with the level of development that you're at, right? Mm-hmm. And then at some point, right, when what you're seeing becomes too complex for your level of development to be able to see it, then that dissonance, that depending on a lot of things, but like that dissonance somehow has you pop forward to where like that which you were seeing with becomes that which is seen. And now you're at a higher level of complexity, reorienting and looking at what you were looking with.
Yes. Classic transparency opacity shift.
Right. Until it gathers into that level of complexity, gathers what you were seeing with into a dichotomy, right? Or a paradox that you can't solve. And then boop, and you just keep going like that. It's reminding me of that.
That's right. And of course, as you were doing this, the gathering, that's that process right there. That's the logos of the process.
Oh, wow.
You even used the term. Yeah.
Even the
grasping, the cohering, the gathering, the putting in order, the logos. That's the logos of the conversation, right? Is the processual putting in order.
Yeah.
as he continues his steps backward.
Right. Damn. Should we keep going, you think?
I don't know. What do you think?
I
We
think
chose a heck of a line to pause on. What was it? Something like, "I hate you, Socrates."
oh, he says, stop pushing me around, Socrates.
Stop pushing me around, Socrates.
Yeah, let's go for another page or two.
Okay, let's do it. Let me find the line again, though. Where is it?
It's like Socrates says, well then, since it's plain,
Where on the page?
at the like the bottom third on page 570.
Got it. Okay. No, in fact, I'm going to push you around and persuade you of the opposite of what you're not willing to show me. Let me read that line again.
Yes.
No, in fact, I'm going to push you around and persuade you of the opposite of what you're not willing to show me.
Just try it.
Just answer my questions.
No, you do the talking yourself.
What? How could anybody read? Sorry, I can't help but wonder at a moment like this. Like, how can anybody hope to sterilize these by extracting, you know what I mean? By dissociating the content from it, by dissociating the content from the character of its tonas.
Yeah.
Like you just got to wonder, like,
yeah.
Anyway,
it's almost demonstrating the foolish.
Yeah. How exactly? Like, how can you hope to extract and sanitize a proposition? Peel away everything that encloses it, all the heat that encloses it, and say that that's the best extract.
Yeah.
Right. To be gleaned from this. It strikes me as it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Okay, where were we? What? Don't you want to be completely convinced?
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Oh, Guy, your audio just conked out on me.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. So you said.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you all of a sudden.
Uh-oh, hang on 1 second.
I just got to do a quick check.
No, you do the talking yourself.
What? Don't you want to be completely convinced?
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Wouldn't you be completely convinced if you yourself said, "Yes, that's how it is"?
Yes, I think so.
Then answer my questions. And if you don't hear yourself say then answer my questions. And if you don't hear yourself say that just things are also advantageous, then don't believe anything else I say. I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
Then answer my questions. And if you don't hear yourself say that just things are also advantageous, then don't believe anything else I say.
No, I'm sure I won't. But I'd better answer. I don't think I'll come to any harm.
You're quite a prophet. Now tell me, are you saying that some just things are advantageous while others are not?
Yes.
Really? Are some of them admirable and others not admirable?
What do you mean by the question?
Have you ever thought that someone was doing something that was both just and contemptible?
No, I haven't.
So all just things are admirable?
Yes.
Now what about admirable things? Are they all good, or are some good and others not good?
What I think, Socrates, is that some admirable things are bad.
And some contemptible things are good?
Yes.
Are you thinking of this sort of case? Many people get wounded and killed trying to rescue their friends and relatives in battle, while those who don't go to rescue them, as they should, escaped safe and sound. Is this what you're referring to?
Exactly.
Now, Now, you call a rescue of this sort admirable, in that it's an attempt to help the people whom you should help, and this is what courage is. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yes.
But you call it bad in that it involves wounds and death, don't you?
Yes.
Now, courage is one thing, and death is something else, right?
Certainly.
So it's not on the same basis that rescuing your friends is admirable and bad, isn't it? Is it? Sorry.
Apparently not.
Now let's see whether, insofar as it's admirable, it's also good, as indeed it is. You agreed that the rescue is admirable in that it is courageous. Now consider this very thing, courage. Is it good or bad? Look at it like this. Which would you rather have, good things or bad things?
Good things.
Namely, the greatest goods?
Very much so.
And wouldn't you be at least willing to be deprived of such things?
Of course.
What would you say about courage? How much would you have to be offered to be deprived of that?
I wouldn't even want to go on living if I were a coward.
So you think that cowardice is the worst thing in the world?
I do.
On par with death, it would seem.
That's what I say.
Aren't life and courage the extreme opposites of death and cowardice?
Yes.
And wouldn't it hurt? Sorry, and wouldn't you want the former most and the latter least?
Yes.
Is that because you think the former are best and the latter are worst?
Certainly.
Would you say that courage ranks among the best things and death among the worst?
I would say so.
So you called rescuing your friends in a battle admirable, insofar as it is admirable, in that it does something good, being courageous.
I think so, anyway.
But you called it bad, in that it does something bad, being fatal.
Yes.
Now, since you call this act bad, insofar as it produces something bad, wouldn't you also, in all fairness, have to call it good, insofar as it produces something good?
I think so.
Isn't it also admirable, insofar as it's good, and contemptible, insofar as it's bad?
Yes.
Then when you say that rescuing one's friends in battle is admirable but bad, you mean exactly the same as if you'd called it good but bad.
I suppose you're right, Socrates.
So nothing admirable to the extent that it's admirable is bad, and nothing contemptible to the extent that it's contemptible is good.
Apparently not.
Now then, let's take a new approach. People who do what's admirable do things well, don't they?
Yes.
And don't people who do things well live successful lives?
Of course.
Aren't they successful because they've got good things?
Certainly.
And they get good things by acting properly and admirably?
Yes.
So it is good to act properly.
Of course.
And good conduct is admirable.
Yes.
So we've seen once again that the very thing that is admirable is also good.
Apparently.
So if we find that something is admirable, we'll also find that it's good, according to this argument, at least.
We'll have to.
Well then, are good things advantageous or not?
Advantageous.
Do you remember what we agreed about doing just things?
I think we agreed that someone who does what's just must also be doing what's admirable.
And didn't we also agree that someone who does what's admirable must also be doing what's good?
Yes.
And that what's good is advantageous?
Yes.
So, Alcibiades, just things are advantageous.
So it seems.
Well then, am I not the questioner, and are you not the answerer?
It appears I am.
So if someone who believed that he knew what is just and unjust were to stand up to advise the Athenians, or even the Peparethians, and said that some things, sometimes just things are bad, what could you do but laugh at him? After all, as you yourself say, the same things are just and also advantageous.
I swear by the gods, Socrates. I have no idea what I mean. I must be in some absolutely bizarre condition. When you ask me questions, first I think one thing, then I think something else.
And are you unaware, my dear fellow, of what this feeling is?
Completely. Huh.
Well, if someone asked you whether you had 2 eyes or 3 eyes or 2 hands or 4 hands or something else like that, do you think you'd give different answers at different times? Or would you always give the same answer?
I'm quite unsure of myself at this point, but I think I give the same answer.
Because you know it. Isn't that the reason?
I think so.
So if you gave conflicting answers about something without meaning to, then it would be obvious that you didn't know it.
Probably.
Well, then you tell me that you're wavering about what is just and unjust, admirable and contemptible, good and bad, and advantageous and disadvantageous. Isn't it obvious that the reason you waver about them is that you don't know about them?
Yes, it is.
Would you also say that whenever someone doesn't know something, his soul will necessarily waver about it?
Of course.
Really? Do you know any way of ascending to the stars?
I certainly don't.
Does your opinion waver on this question too?
Of course not.
Do you know the reason, or shall I tell you?
Tell me.
It is because, my friend, you don't understand it, and you don't think you understand it.
And what do you mean by that?
Let's look at it together. Do you waver about what you realize you don't understand? For example, you know, I think, that you don't know how to prepare a fine meal, right?
Quite right.
So do you have your own opinions about how to prepare it, or waver about it? Do you leave it to someone who knows how?
The latter.
Well, if you were sailing in a ship, would you be out there wondering whether to put the helm or port, whether to put the helm to port or starboard and wavering because you didn't know? Or would you leave it to the skipper and take it easy?
I'd leave it to the skipper.
So you don't waver about what you don't know, if in fact you know that you don't know. I'm going to read that again.
Yeah.
So you don't waver about what you don't know, if in fact you know that you don't know.
Well, apparently not. That seems like a good place to...
You read my mind.
Yeah. So you don't waver about what you don't know, if in fact you know that you don't know.
Mm.
Interesting.
Mm.
Wow, it's nice not knowing who or where I am with you, Christopher.
Likewise, my friend. Likewise.
This is really something. This
It
is really
is.
something. I have a feeling I'm going to be walking around in this inside of this conversation inside of me. It's really
And
interesting.
it will have done its job. I
Yeah.
think the same will be true of me.
Yeah. So
This was great, my friend.
Very,
This was great.
really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the ingenuity. This was your idea, and it's already bearing itself out. It's fantastic.
Okay.
This is great fun.
I'm so glad I knew that I didn't know.
Yes. You're particularly good at knowing that you don't know.
Yes.
And I think, in the spirit of Socrates, I think that's the highest compliment that a philosopher could be paid.
Why, thank you. And I ask again, in answering the question and asking the question, who's speaking it?
Mm. And I ask again, why are you pushing me around, guysengstock?
Because I don't know who I am. So one of the things that's really interesting about this, so again, kind of starting at the starting point, who is Alcibiades to himself, right? And who is he now? Like, he doesn't know. He's precisely the question that he thought he knew, but he's now starting to know that he doesn't know.
That's right.
And that's right where we leave off. It's so interesting.
That's right. Because who he is to himself has become, in this particular dialogic dance, utterly beholden to who he is to Socrates. And who he is to Socrates is constantly mutating.
Yeah.
And so his reflection of himself cast in the eye of Socrates is also constantly mutating.
Right. So good. All right, my friend.
So good. Well, this will be Alcibiades part 1, and we'll do part 2 shortly.
Okay, I'll send you the link when it's uploaded.
Wonderful. Can't wait.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.